The British Royal Navy fired nearly 3,000 shells at the German battleship Bismarck on the morning of May 27, 1941. They scored over 400 direct hits. The upper works were smashed. The superstructure was on fire. The funnel had collapsed. Every gun had been silenced. But the Bismarck would not sink. After more than an hour of continuous bombardment at close range, the hull was still floating. In the end, the crew had to destroy it themselves. They opened the sea valves, set the scuttling charges, and the Bismarck finally went under at 10:39 in the morning. Of the approximately 2,200 men aboard, 114 survived. The rest are still inside the hull, sitting 3 miles down at the bottom of the North Atlantic. Nobody has ever gone back for them. To understand why those men are still there, you need to understand why every warship in Britain was hunting this one ship. 3 days earlier, on May 24th, the Bismarck had done something that stunned the entire Royal Navy. In the Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland, it engaged HMS Hood, the largest and most famous warship in the British fleet. The Hood was the pride of the Royal Navy, a symbol of British sea power that had been on display around the world for 20 years. The battle lasted 8 minutes. A shell from the Bismarck penetrated Hood's deck and reached the aft magazine. The explosion broke the ship in half. HMS Hood sank in 3 minutes. Out of a crew of 1,418 men, 3 survived. When Winston Churchill received the news, he reportedly issued a 6-word order: sink the Bismarck at all costs. The Royal Navy committed virtually every available ship to the hunt: battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, destroyers. They even pulled vessels from convoy escort duty in the middle of the Battle of the Atlantic to chase a single ship. But the Bismarck had also taken damage in that exchange. A hit from Hood's companion, HMS Prince of Wales, had ruptured a fuel tank. The Bismarck lost roughly 1,000 tons of fuel oil and began leaving an oil slick that British aircraft could follow. Admiral Lutyens, commanding the Bismarck, abandoned the breakout into the Atlantic and turned southeast toward occupied France for repairs. For a time, the British lost contact. The Bismarck disappeared into the vastness of the Atlantic, and for over 30 hours, the Royal Navy had no idea where it was. When a reconnaissance aircraft finally relocated the ship on May 26th, it was heading toward the protection of Luftwaffe air cover from France. The window was closing. That evening, Swordfish torpedo bombers launched from HMS Ark Royal in terrible weather conditions. One torpedo struck the Bismarck's stern and jammed the rudder at 12 degrees to port. The ship could no longer steer. It began circling helplessly in the open ocean. The crew worked through the night trying to free the rudder. Divers entered the freezing water. They tried explosive charges. Nothing worked. By dawn on May 27th, the Bismarck was trapped. The British battleships King George V and Rodney opened fire at 8:47 in the morning from a range of about 12 miles. Within 30 minutes, the Bismarck's main guns were silenced. The British ships closed to as little as 3,000 yards, point-blank range for naval guns, and continued firing into a ship that could no longer shoot back. Officers aboard the British vessels later described it as difficult to watch. At some point during the bombardment, the surviving senior officers aboard the Bismarck gave the order to abandon ship and scuttle. The crew opened the sea valves and set explosive charges below the waterline. The Bismarck went under stern first, colors still flying from the mainmast. Some survivors reported that the flag was the last thing visible before the hull disappeared. 114 men were pulled from the water by British ships. The rescue was cut short when a submarine alarm sounded. Whether there was an actual U-boat or not has been debated ever since. But the British ships left. Hundreds of German sailors who were still alive in the water were abandoned. Most of them drowned or died of hypothermia within hours. Now here is where this becomes a story about the men rather than the ship. In 1989, Robert Ballard, the same oceanographer who found the Titanic, located the Bismarck. It was sitting upright on the slope of an extinct underwater volcano at a depth of 15,719 feet. That is just under 3 miles. The condition of the wreck surprised the survey team. Despite the massive bombardment, the hull was largely intact below the waterline. The upper works were destroyed, as expected, but the basic structure of the ship had held. The paint was still visible on the hull. The anti-aircraft guns were still in their mountings. Ballard described the wreck as being in remarkably good condition for a ship that had been hit by nearly everything the Royal Navy had. But 3 miles down is not a depth anyone can reach easily. At that pressure, the water column exerts roughly 8,000 pounds per square inch on anything at the bottom. No diver can go there. Only specialized deep-sea submersibles and remotely operated vehicles can operate at that depth, and the missions are enormously expensive. Even if depth was not a problem, there is a second reason nobody is going near it. The Bismarck is a legally designated war grave under German federal law. The German government has made it explicitly clear that any attempt to enter the wreck, recover artifacts, or disturb the site in any way is prohibited. This is not a suggestion. It carries legal consequences. In 2002, James Cameron conducted a controversial dive to the Bismarck, and he sent remotely operated vehicles inside the hull. The German government protested formally, and since then, the legal protections have been reinforced. And there is a third factor. The roughly 2,000 sailors who went down with the Bismarck are still inside. Their families, many of whom are still alive in Germany, have consistently expressed the position that the wreck should not be disturbed. For those families, the Atlantic Ocean is a cemetery. The Bismarck is not a relic to be explored. It is where their fathers and grandfathers are buried. The Bismarck is sitting 3 miles down in the North Atlantic, upright on a volcanic slope, guns still in place, paint still visible after more than 80 years. 2,000 men went down with it. The ship they served on killed over 1,400 British sailors in 3 minutes, and then absorbed nearly 3,000 shells before the crew destroyed it themselves. It is too deep to salvage, too protected to enter legally, and too sacred to the families who lost someone aboard. It is staying exactly where it is. If your family has a connection to the Bismarck, the Hood, or any of the ships involved in this story, I would like to hear about it.